who are wasting your time. That's where vendors fail. Ironically, it's the one part that if we got right would help the speed of adoption and most importantly, the stickiness of that product. Just because we've sold it to two people in an accountancy firm of 30 or 40 doesn't mean that everyone's going to go, well, we've got something new to use. I'm going to say something that probably is absolutely counterintuitive as someone that works in the sales education and sales leadership side within this industry. But actually,
Phil Hobden is a legend of the accounting tech industry. Now, aside from his influential roles at organisations like Futrli, Capitalise, Wolters Kluwer, and previously at NatWest, Phil can also be found at most industry events, either speaking himself or hosting panels on really, really important topics. Now, the thing I admire most about Phil is his drive to lead and sell through education rather than taking the traditional routes that most people do. And that means that his teams and the people that he works with get a fantastic experience from working with him. And we've seen a lot, and I'm really keen to understand a little bit more about how he's seeing firms putting things into action. So let's get straight into it. Phil, so obviously this is not a show telling accountants what to do, but how to go about achieving their goals. For the firms that are trying to do more with tech and get more automated, all that sort of stuff, how well do you think those firms are succeeding in implementing that at the minute from what you're seeing?
it's a broad question, right? Because there's so many micro factors within that. It's what side's the firm. So if you're a large firm, that technical adoption is still slow, right? Let's be honest. As good as your intentions are to move that amount of client and move that amount of data into a new bit of software or whatever it is, it becomes tricky. So I think it really depends on the size of business you are. Now, look, I'm going to relate this to something that's happening at the moment as we record this. A few weeks, it might have aged a bit. I don't think it will, but a certain company has been hauled over the coals publicly for their new pricing strategy, right? Like, the interesting thing there is absolutely people are dissatisfied with that and they're not happy, right? But realistically, how many are actually going to move their clients from one to another? And the answer is probably not a great amount. And the reason for that is that change takes time, more investment than actually the amount the price is going up or whatever it is. So it's a really tricky question to answer. When I deal with some of the smaller firms and even some of the kind of regional firms, as I would maybe call them, I think that desire to change can be on pace with the ability and the speed of change, right? Like if you're a 5-person firm, a 10-person firm, and you want to implement a new bit of technology and move the needle, you can do that, and you can do that in days. That approval process isn't there. But as you know, Lee, from your time in the industry, and I'm sure we've both had the same pain, quite often it's the decisioning in the larger firms that bottleneck. But then once that decisioning's approved, the next challenge is the rollout within the firm. And I think that's where we as vendors quite often fail to support that rollout and to support that. And I think we actually tend to choke our own digital adoption and transformation because we put so much time on selling it, marketing it, and making it look sexy that actually we then forget that just because we've sold it to two people in an accountancy firm of 30 or 40 doesn't mean that everyone's going to go, well, we've got something new to use. Let's all start using it today. It doesn't happen, right? Like the communication from top to bottom on why we did it, why it's essential, why we're going to use it isn't always brilliant. So that's probably where we as vendors fail the most, is that kind of rollout. And ironically, it's the one part that if we got right would help the speed of adoption and most importantly, the stickiness of that product. Going back to my point about vendor, that is a very sticky product, right? If you've got it with all of your teams using it and all of your clients are using it, how do you unpick that and introduce a new provider or a new solution? And the answer is, with all the will in the world, it's not going to be something you can do overnight, unless you're a smaller company, of course. So I think as vendors, that's where we probably fail the most, is that we talk a good story, we sell a great story, we can sell the dream of that product, but then the implementation and the rollout isn't always as robust as what we do at the front end.
So if I'm the cloud champion in a firm then, and someone's just come in and said, we've just bought 500 subscriptions of something, we need to roll it out. And that's landing on my desk and I've got to figure out how to do that right. I guess the challenge is you don't know what you don't know, and they may not necessarily know what to go and ask the vendor for. So if you were in my shoe, well, this cloud champion shoes, what would you be saying that they should go to their vendor or be proactively asking for to help with the rollout?
I think there's another problem here, and I think you've got to take a step back even further than that. That cloud champion could have 4 or 5 or 6 bits of new technology that different people have got involved in or bought. Like, I've seen it, back in my days at Futrli, we were, it was earlier on in the industry. So people were adopting us at the same time they were adopting Dex, at the same time they were rolling out Zero, at the same time they were rolling out whatever else, right? Like, sometimes it can all fall on that person. So I'm going to say something that probably is absolutely counterintuitive as someone that has worked in the sales and education and sales leadership side within this industry. But actually, before you roll out a bit of software and before you say yes, take a step back and work out what you're already rolling out, where you are with that rollout, and if that rollout's been successful. Because if you add something else on top of it, and then something else on top of that, and something else on top of that, counter to my point earlier, no matter how good we are as vendors at implementing that technology, there are only so many hours in the day. And also, if you imagine that you're an accountant in an accountancy firm, how happy are you going to be every week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, getting a new piece of technology or a new, having to learn something, train on it, we love online learning as tech vendors, right? Yeah, don't do an online course. It's only going to take you 2 hours, an hour, 25 minutes, but that's fine if I've got that time. Majoritatively, I don't, because I'm dealing with clients. So, I remember when I always tell this story. I remember when I started working with Futrli, I went through our onboarding process and our help videos and everything else. And there's about 12 hours worth of education that I did. And I remember phoning up Helen and saying, Helen, I don't know if I can take this job. I just don't understand the product at all. I just genuinely don't. I need to understand it. And she was like, look, let me talk you through it and let me show you. And she did it and she brought it to life. But the video, I remember there was an American lady with that talks fast. I talk fast, but she talks super fast with like a really strong accent and like, going all over the screen. And I was just like, I don't understand any of this. None of it's going in. So I had to watch everything twice, which was like 20 odd hours worth of learning. A lot, right? But then take that to a firm, then actually doing that 5, 6 times, even in a year, is a huge time sink. So I think the best way to implement and roll out technology sometimes is not to, and is to kind of work out what is important and have a plan of saying, right, we need to solve this problem. And then when we solve that, we need to solve this problem. And when we solve that, we need to solve that problem. Now, there's some things that will obviously run side by side, some challenges or problems or opportunities do. But I think that overwhelm of that cloud champion, or whoever is in that kind of, IT lead, whatever that role is, it's broadly the same, right? They're there to implement. Or worst case, if it's a founder in a smaller IT firm, smaller accountancy firm, you've got to avoid, because ultimately all that will happen is it's the same journey. We buy the technology, we're really excited. We kind of, that excitement drops a bit as we go through implementation. Implementation goes, oh, some clients want it, brilliant, a bit more. And then it drops off a little bit. I'm realizing I'm running out of screen here. Let's go about this way. It drops off a little bit. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, look, a new piece of technology is coming. Brilliant. We'll use that. And this bit of technology does this. And then after 6 months, you're like, why are we paying for that? We don't really use it. And then you churn, and then we're unhappy as vendors because we've lost you. So it's a real balance. And let's be honest, you look at the App Store. How many apps are on the Zero App Store now? Thousands, right?
1,000, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, then you've got Sage, then you've got Intuit, and then you've got whatever. And they're not always the same. And then you're doing it with sometimes 2 or 3 different ledger softwares as well. I think there really needs to be a plan. And I think like that shiny penny syndrome that definitely we saw when we were starting out, where people would buy everything and try and implement it. It led to a lot of pain, and it led to a lot of pain on both sides. As a vendor, we lose a customer. You're not going to be an advocate of ours because you've decided it didn't work for you. But actually, in reality, that blame is as much on us rushing you to implement it and then not implementing it properly as it is on the accountancy firm not rolling it out properly and not embedding it as part of their practice. And this is something we did really well at Capitalise. We built a champion. The sponsor, sorry, would buy it. The champion would roll it out, and they'd build a team under them to help roll that out and get breadth within the firm. And therefore it becomes sticky from top to bottom because you're rolling that out deeper and wider and wider and wider and wider. So more and more people are using it. And you the worst case scenario, right, is that cloud champion that's in charge of all of this then decides they want to leave for another job.
Yeah.
And if they're the only person that is using the tech or rolling it out, then that's a challenge, right? So for me, I think the key learning is actually just make sure that what you want to implement is something you've got time to implement and roll it out and have the buy-in for the rest of the business, and we'll help you with that. And that way you can successfully roll it out, can work.
Do you think firms are not approaching it strategically, or actually are they doing that and maybe the issues lie elsewhere?
Again, I think it's a bit of both, right? I don't think there is one analog for every single firm out there. Some
Sure.
firms are doing this really well. Like you talk to a John Toome, for example, and John's very good at strategically rolling out tech and software and implementing it and making sure it gets sticky within that firm. Brilliant. Others not so much. So I think it's a bit of a depends on the firm. I think the other issue is you talk about tactically and strategically, right? Like I think sometimes a challenge comes along, so we find a bit of software, we try and implement that bit of software to solve that one or two people's challenge.
Yeah.
But actually, it's like the reverse question, right? An accountant comes to you and says, "Well, why doesn't your software have this?" And if you ran away and then got product to build that one thing for that one customer to solve their problem,
Yeah.
you've solved one person's problem. But that's a very expensive way to solve one person's problem. It's a lot of time, effort, and development without actually realizing, well, actually, is it your problem or is it everyone's problem? So as vendors, we're really bad at that, right? Like we try to please. I had a conversation the other day with someone in our product team, and they were brilliant. They were like, we will now not build something unless we can properly validate it across a good chunk of the industry, because we've got to stop doing this kind of building a feature because two people ask for it. Or, salespeople are terrible at this, right? Well, we'll go back and say, hey, look, they won't buy it, but if you built this one feature, everyone's going to buy it. But in reality, they're not. Maybe that one person. But I guarantee you'll go back to that one person and they'll find something else that they weren't happy with. Because actually, ultimately, what we've not done as salespeople, we've not properly qualified this. We've not gone through whatever methodology you want to use and found out the pain or found out what the actual pain is. And I think accounting firms can be the same. Any business is not just accountants. Any business is implementing tech is the same. You've got to look for the genuine pain underneath. And as a vendor, we have to help you find that genuine pain. Because if all you're curing is a symptom, you're not actually solving the problem. Months ago, last year, maybe a year and a half ago, I had a problem where I had weird numbness in my arm. One day when I sat having a conversation with someone. Yeah, never a good sign.
Yeah.
And I went to hospital and they thought it was something quite serious. I could have taken ibuprofen for that. It probably would have helped. And it would have potentially solved the symptom, definitely not solved the pain. Turned out it was a neck issue from bad posture in a terrible office chair, which I've now solved. But that was truly going back and understanding what the pain was and finding that pain and then curing that pain. And since then, I've had no issues at all. We have to apply the same methodology when we're implementing technology. Are we implementing it to solve a pain, or a true pain, or are we implementing it to solve a symptom of someone's pain? Because if it's the symptom, then you're probably not going to get that full adoption because it's not something that's going to be relevant to all your clients.
That feels like step zero for firms, right? Is
Yeah,
make sure they
100%.
understand what is the actual thing that you're trying to solve here. And then presumably from there, how we're going to roll it out. What are the combination of processes, products, people, whatever that we need to achieve that, and then proactively go out. Because I think sometimes firms can find themselves marching to the beat of the app vendor's drops, right? It's got
Yeah,
inflatable
100%.
or whatever.
100%. And that's the worst thing, by the way, because, you know, like, what we ultimately, right? Yes, we're here to help you help your clients, but app vendors are here to kind of sell their software and technology. That's ultimately what vendors do. We can dress it up in any way that we want, right? Like, but ultimately, yes, it's going to solve your pain or your problem or your client's pain or your client's problem. Fantastic. But there are investors and board members and everything else that sit behind what we do that inform why we do it.
Yeah.
So if you're marching to the beat of our drum, then you're probably not marching to the beat of your customer's drum, and that's can be a danger. Sometimes you do have to dictate it, by the way. Sometimes you have to dictate to your client the right thing to do.
Yep.
Or a piece of like receipt capture technology. I imagine when that launched, many firms were like, we're going to save hours on this. Clients are like, oh, I don't care. I just give you a box of receipts, right? It wasn't until someone turned around and said, well, yeah, you can give us a box of receipts and it'll cost you £1,000, or you can scan everything in every month and it'll cost you £50.
Yeah.
So they go, okay, now I see why I need to do.
I think there's an interesting point in there, isn't there, about whose problem is actually being solved. So I remember
Oh,
that
100%.
exactly as you described it. Several clients will pay for it. It's like, well, yeah, why would they? Either way, they get their receipts done, whether they drop you a shoebox or scan it. Why do they care? If you're going to take that off, you're not solving their problem. But before getting into that side of things, I wanna stay at the strategic level for a second. So if you assume the firm then has got their strategy, they know where they want to go, they know how they want to serve their clients, and they've got that thing together. What I'm really interested to get from you, Phil, is for if you think of the top 2 or 3 firms that have really nailed executing on their strategy and getting to where they want to get to, what are the common themes across those firms? What have they each done really, really well to pave the way for their own success?
So it starts with leadership for me, right? Like there has to be a clear vision from the leadership and above. And that's where it gets a little bit difficult in bigger firms because that leadership could be global. So if you're looking at, I can think of a firm over in Essex, right? That a fantastic execution. They bought in the software, they rolled it out to their team. They did it with a clear vision, right? This is why we're implementing this software. This is why we are telling you that we're going to use it. This is why your clients are going to benefit from it. And this is how we're going to engage the client to let them know about it, right? So that clear leadership and that clear vision, which is then delivered to the team and then delivered to the end user or the SMB or the client, customer, whatever, however you want to call it. And what they did also is they included the vendor at all 3 of those steps. So we came in and talked to the board and told them what our product is and what it does. We got them bought in. When they bought in on it and decided to roll out, we came in and spoke to the team and we bought them in pizza and stuff and, you know, all the standard stuff. But we got them to buy into it with actual stories of customers. And we kind of did a couple of tests with their customers so we could bring it to life with, hey, Johnny, your customer, we did this. Let's talk about the impact. So brought it to life. And then we rolled that out and then we did webinars and creative materials for the customer as well. So that kind of leadership from top to bottom gave that clear vision of the why and the how. Okay. And then alongside that, we robustly reviewed it and reviewed people's performance of it. So we were kind of giving effectively management reporting back to the accountancy firm so they could see how their staff was engaging and the success or not that they were having. Because that firm were, each one of the people in that firm had targets, and each one of those people were rewarded based on their targets. They're not salespeople, right? But what they are is they are absolutely there to help service their customers.
Yeah.
And the better they did that by whatever metric dictated a percentage of their reward. So those metrics fed into that. It wasn't like all of it. So now you've got leadership, you've got ownership, and over top of that, you've got kind of an acceptance for us to be able to come in and sit with people, coach them, and help them out. So leadership, ownership, and accountability. I think if you can nail those three pillars, I think, what you do will be successful, whether it's rolling out technology or whether it's whatever, right? For me, those three things, and that's what that firm did. Great leadership, great ownership, and great accountability.
Sounds from what you're describing, there's another element of partnership in there as well, because that doesn't feel like a simple transaction. And that's what happens a lot, I find, is that you go, right, here's 500 subscriptions or licenses or whatever, off you go. Oh, there's a transaction, we'll do a deal, great, everyone's happy, but that's kind of the end of it, right? You get support or whatever, but it's there. What you've described sounds much more like a project partnership, right? We're going to work together to roll this out, yeah, and things like that. And that sounds like that's been born of a much more intentional approach up front, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where a lot of vendors go wrong. Right. Going back to that point at the beginning, right? It's not just a fire and forget. Some products absolutely are, right? But if you're not a Zero, if you're not a Dex, if you're not, one of the accounts, like the Wolters Kluwer Iris type products, right? Like if you're not one of those, so a piece of software that a firm has to use, if you're not a must have, if you're a nice to have, which I would argue effectively 98%, 99% of the apps on the App Store are nice to haves, not must to haves, right? If you're not going into that level of partnership and relationship with the accountant you're dealing with, then you're probably not going to get the success you want. I think what everyone always looks to do is volume of accountants. Oh, we work with 10,000 accountancy firms.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Amazing. Good job. But in reality, how many of them are actually doing anything with you? Like back in the QuickBooks days of, we've sold 20,000 licenses this month. Brilliant. How many of them are actually being activated? Same with Xero, same with Sage, right? What I'd rather have is 100 relationships with accountants, strong relationships with accountants, where each one of those accountants were utilizing my product with 100 of their customers. Because then, exponential, that's where the revenue comes.
Definitely.
And that's where the stickiness comes. And that's the partnership side, right? Going wide and going deep.
Absolutely. And so I think we've alluded to a few things here, but I'd really love to pin you down on what are 2 or 3 things that you would love to see the vendors start to do to help the accounting community roll out a lot of really good value to their clients via technology. Like what would you love to see them do?
I think vendors have to understand their market better. Yes, we can quite easily buy hearts and minds with water bottles and pizzas and all of that stuff, right? But ultimately, if you're giving away 10 grand's worth of swag on a stand at a show, but you don't close any deals. So I actually think, do you know what I would love to see? I'd love to see swag banned from this bloody industry. I think swag is one of the worst things in this industry, right? It's great for people to go and collect it, but I don't like giving. You give stuff away and there's no relationship. It's not a transactional relationship, right? Like, can I have swag? Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Ask, can I scan your badge first? Why? What's the point? What genuinely as a vendor, other than raw data, have I got out of that? And do you know what? That data is probably on the Zero App Store or in the yellow pages, for God's sake. Like, what have I got out of it? There's no transaction. There's no relationship. There's no anything. Literally just have some. So let's bin that off, right? And actually, look, I'm happy to give you this water bottle or whatever it is, but let's have a chat first. And let's find out, because you're going to do this with 30 vendors, right? So do you need 30 water bottles? Or do you need 30 products? So I think there needs to be a great level of honesty from vendors about what we're there to do, because some people walk out of Accountex with 12 bags full of stuff. And I have to say, I find it a little bit embarrassing now that we've got to this point in the industry where we just like, like have more stuff. Don't need anything from you though. It's not sustainable, right? This is why we've seen vendors leave this space. So number one, I think there has to be more honesty and transparency in that relationship, right? We have to genuinely have that relationship and have that honesty. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is we need to put as much effort into growing the product internally. I think we have to stop worrying about sales at the front end and kind of almost move the sales to the middle when we implement the technology and think of that as the true sale.
Yes.
I think it's relatively easy to sell a piece of technology into accounting, right? I say that flippantly. It's clearly not, but it is easier than it. But the hard bit is actually selling it internally, selling it to clients, selling it to other people. So we need to realize the sale is the middle bit, not the front bit. The middle bit is the really important bit. And so we need to put as much effort into that. That's where you give the water bottles out. That's where you give the swag out. It's those people that are in the office that you're trying to kind of get on board and get them interested in what you do and, get them thinking about your product every day. That's where that goes. So I think there's the honesty and transparency. I think there's really focusing on that middle outcome as a key piece. And I guess probably the third. What is the third? The third, I think there needs to be an understanding on both sides that this should be a partnership. That I can ask things from you, you can ask things from me, but I'm allowed to, like, some of the team at Capitalise were great at this. They'd go to meetings like it was their one-to-one with Nelson, and they'd sit there and they'd speak to the accountant and they'd go, right, so last meeting you agreed you were going to do X, Y, and Z. What have we achieved out of that? And we hold people to account. So I think if we're looking to roll out that software in a firm, in a practice, I think there has to be accountability on both sides, but it has to be driven by us as vendors. We have to drive that accountability, because again, otherwise we're doing you a disservice as an accountant. We're wasting your time. We genuinely are. We're wasting your time, and your time is super valuable. And you will eventually resent me for wasting your time. Because if we have like agendas, right? Like I say to my my team, be it sales or success, what's the agenda for that call? Why is the agenda not in the email? Like if I have a meeting and there's not an agenda in the email to tell me what the meeting's about, I generally won't. I'll look at it and go, I don't know why that's important to me.
Yeah.
I might still attend, but like for me, I want the accountant to look at it and go, oh crap, I agreed to do this last time. I haven't done it. I need to do that today because I've got that meeting with Phil tomorrow. I've got that meeting with Lee tomorrow. So that level of accountability really needs to be there, because I think that's what will help drive proper adoption and make that investment financially and time-wise really important.
I think as a salesperson, though, I can imagine a few account managers sort of recoiling at what you said there. Like, oh, I wouldn't want to do that because that'll annoy my partner or whatever. But I think there's a process where you've got to earn the right to do that, haven't you? You've got to earn the right to be accountable. You can't obviously go in with that. So what have you found to be an effective way?
But can you not though? Because for me, it's like, if you're that first meeting that if you said to me as an accountant, right, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. So we need you to get us set up on the platform, assign training to the right people, whatever it is, right? If you said that to me, would you expect me to be accountable for those actions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I have to be accountable for those actions, then I have that right, because you're asking from me, I have a right to softly, and correctly
Yeah.
set out that relationship from the beginning, because it's easier at the beginning to say, look, this is how I work. Like, you can ask stuff from me and I will make sure I deliver that. But actually, in return, to help you roll this out, I'm going to be asking stuff from you. Are you comfortable with that? And if they say no, maybe they're not the right person to roll that out, because actually you want someone that's going to be accountable, because otherwise it might not get rolled out or rolled out successfully. If they say yes, then you have a contract at the beginning where accountability will sit on both sides. So I actually think it's the pretty much post introduction. It's one of the first things you do is you build that contract to say, I'm accountable to you, but I will ask you to be accountable to me, and working together, we will roll this out and it will be successful.
I feel like that links back then properly to your first point around openness and transparency around here's what we want out of this and here's what we can deliver to you, and really being open about that. But also the other idea that you mentioned earlier on, that, well, we don't need 10,000 accountants. Give me 10 that will do it properly. And then I can spend the time on that. And so if people aren't willing to commit to that, well, they go in the bucket with the other 9,990 or whatever we kind of don't want at this point.
One of my team is brilliant at this, right? He will sit there and he'll look at projects, and he account manages. He's like, look, I'm always available. I'm always open if you need something, but come to me if you need something. And then he'll look at adoption and he'll start to see, well, actually, these guys are really starting to kind of adopt it. I'm going to hone down on that and focus my time on those ones that are adopting, because that's where we can, if they're starting to adopt, kind of, 1, 2, 4, 6, 10, boom, let's get in there. And because they're already kind of on that journey, because it's impossible to properly manage 300 clients, 400 clients, like as an account manager. It's a fallacy that anyone can do that well. So I think you have to not pick your battles, but pick your opportunities. But for me, it does come back to open and transparency, setting out a contract at the beginning, kind of understanding on both sides that for this to work, and roll that up again. And this goes back to that model that I spoke about earlier. Sell to the sponsor, get the sponsor to nominate a champion. That champion has ownership, and then you work with the champion, and then once a quarter report back to the sponsor. And that keeps that kind of circle of honesty there, because the sponsor will hold the champion to account. You support the champion to make sure it's successful, but you're working with the sponsor also to make sure that the whole project rolls out because they've got their name on it. And I think, that's probably where that transparency and accountancy comes from the beginning.
Excellent. And I think, although that's really good advice for vendors, I would hope that any firms or cloud champions watching can take that and almost put that into a wish list and go to their vendors they work with and go, right, this is what we want. This is how we want to work with you. And hopefully it can be a bit more of a meeting in the middle to get these things rolled out. Phil, that's been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. If anyone wants to follow up with you, ask questions, follow you on social media, what is the best place for them to find you?
Probably LinkedIn, right? Like, I think I'm renowned for being the guy that's on LinkedIn, a lot. So if you want to find out more about me, just pop onto LinkedIn, drop me a message. Believe it or not, I am that person who responds to every message he gets on LinkedIn, even the really bad sales one. So I'm always happy to have a chat. But look, I genuinely think that the best way to build those successful relationships and make sure we're implementing, rolling out technology properly is that holding both sides to account. So, like, accountants absolutely need to hold vendors far more to account, because we need to give you back the same commitment that you are giving us. I think that's really important. So I think it's key. And that should be the fundamental foundation of every relationship.